Okay, welcome everybody. So just a little bit of an introduction since this is the first time we're doing this year. Just give a little bit of an sort of an outline of what's going on. So there's a Dirshu curriculum, which is basically Daf Yomi, but instead of Gemara, it's on Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah is the commentary of the Chafetz Chaim on the Shulchan Aruch. And the Shulchan Aruch, he codified halacha. So it's he has different sections of halacha, but it's just on Orach Chaim. Mishnah Berurah is just on one section of the Shulchan Aruch, and that deals with basically the day-to-day stuff. And so the way it works is that he has a bunch of different sections, and he speaks about the sections by topic, and then that's how he covers ground on all the different halachos. So the Dirshu does one page of Mishnah Berurah per day. And then what we're going to do on this Chabura, what we're going to do together is we're basically going to summarize the week's learning in one half an hour session. So it takes a little bit longer to do that per week if you were to actually read it inside. So I'm basically going to pick out the highlights, what I think is most relevant, most important, and we're gonna learn it together. And this way, if we keep going, then by the end of 7 years, we'll have finished the entire Mishnah Berurah, which will be a really great accomplishment. So we're going to start. So the last week it was talking about the halachos of Beis Knesset, about a shul, and that kind of ended in the middle. So we're going to start with the new topic. It's a very first new topic. It's a very quick section, and we're even going to be able to start the next section too. The first section is about Dinei Seuda, about eating. It's just about like when to eat, how do we define the proper time to eat, and maybe some other proper ways that someone follows halacha should eat, what's the appropriate way to eat. And then we're going to start a big section, which is the section of Netilat Yadayim, washing one's hands before we eat. So let's just get started. The Shulchan Aruch says that first we'll start with eating. So the Shulchan Aruch says that when you get to the fourth hour of the day, so you should make sure to eat something. But if you're a Talmud Chacham and you're busy learning, then you can wait until the sixth hour of the day to begin eating. Below Yachar Yoser, he says you shouldn't wait too long to eat. If you're eating too late in the day, he says that's not good to have a kezorik even lachaimet. If you eat in the afternoon, if you eat too late, let's say you're eating at 3 p.m., he equates it to basically like you have a barrel of wine and it's not full, and you put rocks in there. So that doesn't give you more wine. So he says that's what it's like if you eat in the afternoon without eating in the morning. It's not good. Then Mishnah Berurah, so he comments, he says that if Poalim, people who are workers, they're busy working, they're out at work, so it's okay if they don't eat at the fourth hour of the day, they start eating at the fifth hour of the day. He says that's okay too. But the question is, how do we count the hours of the day? Does it go by when you wake up, or does it go by sunrise? So the Mishnah Berurah writes that let's say if you wake up before Amud Shachar, if you wake up before dawn, then you would count the hours from dawn. Like let's say you're early riser, you wake up at 2 a.m. Okay, so then you can count from around sunrise. And then but let's say you're a late sleeper, so you like to sleep in. Okay, so then you can count the hours from when you wake up. You wake up at 10 a.m. So then you can count 4, 5, 6 hours depending what you're doing. It really depends what category you fit in. And that's when you should have at least eaten by then. Okay, so why are we getting so specific about ways to eat? Why are we starting with this? So we're starting with this because that's what we're up to in the Dirshu. But what's the upshot here? I think what Mishnah Berurah quotes, he says he quotes some other proper ways to eat, which is I think why we're spending our time on it, is that even halacha, you think is only about specific things that relate to things that we do, which are specific to Judaism, specific halachos. Like, for example, we're going to get into washing your hands, but halacha is really about every single thing we do should be done in the proper way. We should make sure to act accordance with halacha and with proper hashkafa, proper mindset. And so that's why the Mishnah Berurah quotes from the Zohar. They quote very interesting that he says that a person, he should not, I don't know if we can do this nowadays, but he says a person should not cook too much in advance, and he shouldn't hold on to his food he shouldn't store it basically for too long. What's the reason? So he says, why is it not proper to do that? It's so that you should ask for Hashem every single day for your food. And that way you're gonna get this. By asking from Hashem, you get this bracha every single day. That's what you should want. You shouldn't actually, so now we have fridges, we have a lot of leftovers. I guess they didn't always used to have that. And he says that that's actually the proper way, more proper way to act with food. And then, so they quote from, so what Dirshu is, right? Dirshu is a special edition of the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah is written by Chafetz Chaim, but on the side, they quote a more contemporary Rebbeim who they kind of deal with some more modern issues. And it's basically a collection of different ideas they put in it. So it's like Mishnah Berurah plus. You get the Chafetz Chaim, which is what most people study, but then you get some more stuff, and we'll talk about some interesting cases that come up in addition to the cases that are the rules which are listed by the Shulchan Aruch and explained by the Mishnah Berurah. So they quote on the side that first they quote from the Torah that you should eat bread in the morning. That it's a mitzvah. He said it's a mitzvah to make sure that you treat yourself well. And it's a proper way to act is to make sure you're healthy. Right? So you should be healthy in order to serve God. That's a mitzvah. You should do that. And so that's why Shulchan Aruch quoting this in that when is it appropriate to eating? He's telling you how to be healthy. And so that's the point there. And then they quote from the Zohar, is very interesting, that says that some people have, he says, mitzvah la'omra kol yom kol mitzvah, that it's a mitzvah to basically say this prayer which he quoted before you eat. The hostess, and he adds, shenagu lomar mizmor Hashem Roey lo echsa. That someone say this mizmor, saying that Hashem's with me. I don't need to be afraid. He's going to take care of everything. To say that after you wash, before you make that motzi. And then he says, Yoter nachol namrach. Birchas hamotzi, some say it's better to say it after hamotzi, which makes sense because usually we don't talk in between when we wash and when we eat. And then they say that they quote from the Chayyadim that some people would say this also, this extra tefillah. It says, before I fulfill this mitzvah of eating, right, taking care of myself, let me make sure I do it to serve God. Okay, so that's basically Dinei Seuda about eating. Now we're gonna start the halachos of washing your hands. Does anyone have any questions there?
Well, if we want to look for this on Safaria, where do you suggest we find it?
Oh yeah, sorry. So this is if you go into Safaria, you could go to Halacha, and then you could go into Shulchan Aruch, and then that will give you 4 more options, and you'll choose Orach Chaim. And then we're in 157. Well, we just finished 157, and now we're going to be in 158, and it's the laws of washing our hands before we eat. Okay, so no problem. Sorry, I should have started with that. Okay, so Netilas Yadayim, right? We all do it, but do we really know why we do it? So Mishnah Berurah says, as a means of introduction, before we get to all the rules that are about Netilas Yadayim, he says, how come we're even doing this in the first place? What's the reason for Netilas Yadayim? So he gives 2 reasons. First reason is because of Truma. So what does that mean? He says, Serach Truma. explains behind Kavan the Adai Maskoni of them, since our hands are usually are dirty, the Nogim Bechol Davar, and our hands touch all these different things. You don't know where your hand goes every single day. Vizman Shayanoe Tuma Vitara Hakonim Aflu Truma. And so it used to be that Bnei Yisrael, they would ask the Truma and Tahara, that they'd be very careful about what's Tameh, what's ritually pure, what's ritually impure, and what's ritually pure. And so so every time they would eat this truma, which was sanctified food, which was just for the kohanim, only the kohanim could eat the truma. So they would have to wash their hands before they ate it because their hands were dirty. And because the rabbis, they wanted the kohanim to become really used to washing their hands before they ate the truma. Gadu came, I'll call you Yisrael. So they made sure to apply this decree to all of Bnei Yisrael to make sure to wash your hands before they eat. That before you ate bread, you should make sure to wash your hands. And then they explained, okay, but what about nowadays? Okay, nowadays the kohanim don't eat truma because everyone's tamei. Lo batal takanazu. So they didn't nullify this decree because they want us to be ready. We never know when the base of Mikdash is going to come and we're going to start eating truma again. So we've got to be ready. And so everyone's going to keep washing their hands before we eat bread, just so the kohanim are ready, know to do it when the base of Mikdash returns. The otam, so that's reason number one. The reason number one is truma. We did it, even though we're not no hig b'truma, right? We don't eat truma. The kohanim don't eat truma, and even Israel never eats truma. Still, it's just to become ready for it and to prepare for when the base of Mikdash comes. That's reason number one. Reason number two is that it explains mishum nekiyas kedusha, because you should be clean and you should be holy. And he quotes the pasuk, Hashem yitem kedoshim, so that you should sanctify yourself and you should be holy. Okay, so that explains why we wash our hands. The problem is, okay, so then, I gave you two reasons, right? Either because of truma or because you should basically be holy. Okay, so how come we just wash our hands for bread? We should wash our hands for everything we eat. So they quote in the Dirshu a lot which deals with it. So they explain that because on a deraisa level, meaning from the Torah itself, deraisa is the Torah. So from the Torah level itself, truma only applies to three things: to dagan, pirosh, and yitzar. The pasuk says, "Reishis dagan chatu shlavit terecha." What does that mean? Dagan is grain, and pirosh and yitzar there's oil and wine. So from a biblical obligation, the only things which have truma are basically the grain and oil and wine. And so he explains that, okay, so dagan, which is grain, the way to eat it is most people, at least back then, the way they would eat grains is they would turn it into bread. So they were only made sure to just, okay, anything with grains, so that's going to have truma. But what about oil and wine? So they explain that because what's the normal way to eat oil and wine? You don't touch oil and wine when you eat it. If you do, you got to wash your hands. You don't want to touch it. You want to put it in a cup, or you want to cook with it, right? You don't actually hold it and eat it. So that's why they never actually required you to wash your hands for it. That's one answer that they quote from the Shulchan Aruch Harav, which is the Alter Rebbe. Then they quote from the Chazon Ish a different answer. Okay, so we're going to get into this more later, but Chazon Ish says that they didn't decree to wash your hands for fruits, because for fruits they only become a problem if they become hochshor v'kabel tama. What does hochshor v'kabel tama mean? It means that it's sort of like they need to be activated to become tummy. That when we're dealing with fruits and vegetables, if I'm tummy, right? If I'm tummy and I'm not ritually pure, and then I touch an apple, let's say. So if it's just a plain apple and it's not wet, so it's not going to become tummy. But let's say let's say it has water on it. So now the water sort of activates the fruit. It activates the apple, sort of like when you activate your credit card. Right? It's not the best example, but your credit card doesn't work beforehand. So the apple is not going to become tummy before, and now it gets water on it, and now since I'm tummy and I touch it, it's going to become tummy. So he says, okay, because fruits they don't always become tummy. Let's say if they're not wet, so that's why it doesn't that's why it doesn't apply. We don't wash our hands for fruit. And that's why they only decreed to wash our hands on bread. Okay, so that's why we do this on bread. Okay, so now a few more. So the Mishnah quotes a few halachos about actually washing your hands, but I think he's going to get into the bulk of it later, so we're not going to cover too much. But I mean, we're just going to run through it quickly. But I think we're going to get into it probably next week or the week after, even that he says you should make sure to wash your hands you make sure to wash both your hands. You should wash your hands. You should make sure to use a kli, a vessel. You shouldn't just stick your hands under a faucet. You should use a vessel. And even if you're just eating in one hand, right? Let's say I'm in New York or on the subway. I'm eating pizza with one hand, right? And you got my phone in the other hand, so maybe I just need to wash the hand I'm touching the pizza with. No, you got to wash with both your hands. And we'll get more into all the details later. It says you should wash your right hand before your left hand. Okay, but that's not, sometimes the Mishnah Berurah likes to quote all the halachos, which you don't even see until later on. But those are some of the halachos that he quotes. Also, he says that when you wash your hands, you should make sure to be standing. And then they quote a whole debate here. They quote this whole debate. Do you need to stand every single time that you say a bracha? And so they quote from the Beis Yosef, who says that, yeah, every time you say any bracha, you need to make sure you're standing. And then they quote some who say, no, that's actually not true. I remember I asked one of my rebbeim in yeshiva, do I need to stand every time I say Asher Yasa, which is the bracha after you use the bathroom? And he said, no, you can sit. So I don't know. The Beis Yosef says, no, you should really stand for every bracha. So I don't know. I'm sure he had a good source for that. And then he said, okay, fine. So that's what they say about washing your hands. But now, let's go into the actual beginning of what the Shulchan Aruch says. So he explains about washing your hands. So he starts by saying that when when you're going to eat bread, it's only bread that you would say hamotzi on that you should wash your hands for. But let's say you wouldn't say hamotzi. Let's say it's like really like more of like these crackers that you'd say mizonos on. Then you don't wash your hands. You don't need to say you don't wash your hands. You don't, because you're not saying hamotzi on it. You only say hamotzi for bread, basically not for crackers. Okay, and then he says, okay, but how much? Next question is, how much bread do you need to eat? If I just eat a nibble of bread, do I need to wash my hands for that? It's not a meal. Maybe someone made challah and I want to try their challah, but I don't actually want to eat right now. Do I need to wash my hands for that? So the Shulchan Aruch says, he has two rules that he says, Yesh Misha Omer Shim Ochal Ala Pachos Mikabisa Yitol Yadav Lo Yivarach. So some say, okay, if you eat less than an egg's worth, then you don't need to wash your hands. You don't need to make a bracha. And then he says, Im Ochal Pachos Mikizayis Yesh Misha Omer Shein Tarach. And then he says, oh, but if you ate less than an olive's worth, then there's some who say you don't need to wash. Okay, so which one is it? Are we talking about an egg's worth, an olive's worth? Which one is bigger? It's all confusing. Okay, so let's sort through this. So an egg is a bigger size than an olive. And what is the significance of the egg? So Mishnah Berurah explains that in regard to the egg, so they explains that anything which is smaller than an egg on a biblical level, deraisa, is not going to be able to accept tumah. It's not going to become tameh. It's going to always be pure if it's smaller than that. And so therefore, right, if you remember the two reasons why we're even washing our hands in the first place, one of them was about truma. So if I'm eating less than an egg's worth size, then I don't need to wash my hands, because the whole thing in the first place wouldn't have mattered. It would never have been truma in the first place. that's why some say you don't need to do it. He quotes a dispute. Okay, but what about the other side? If you're quoting dispute, what does the other side say? So the other side says that no, since there's two things going on here. That there's one thing is about truma, but the other thing is if I eat bread nowadays, forget about washing, forget about truma, forget about all the confusion. If I eat bread nowadays, what do we say? We say usually you have to bench, right? You have to say beer custom other than after you eat bread, and make sure to bench on it. But how much bread do you need to eat? You need to eat an olive's worth of kazayim. Okay, so some say, so since, right, let's say if I'm less than an egg but more than an olive, so that's where this first dispute is that some say it's that we're only washing our hands because it has to do with the truma, so I don't need to do it. But some say no, that we're washing our hands nowadays because we have to, because it's about benching, since it's still considered an important, still considered an important amount of food in regard to benching. So therefore, I need to wash my hands. And the Mishnah Berurah says, what should you do? He says, yeah, you should make sure to wash your hands, but don't say a bracha. Don't say a bracha because we're not really sure. If we're in the general rules, if we're not sure if we should say a bracha or not, usually we say that stuff like bracha sahakel, don't make a bracha. Okay, so then what about if it's less than an olive? What are you supposed to do? So that's considered less than a amount of food, proper food for even benching. So there he quotes another dispute. So some say, okay, yeah, if it's less than that amount of food it's already less than the amount of food for truma. So the whole reason why we would have to wash in the first place, according to that reason, doesn't matter. And it's less than a proper amount of food that I would even have to bench for. It's not considered significant to that. So of course, why should I have to wash my hands? There's no reason I should have to wash my hands. Yet there are some equals, because the Lefram Hamudos, the Magin Abram, Dali Rabba, Od Achronim. There's no, even when it's less than a kizayis, even if it's less than an olive, you should make sure to wash your hands. Don't say a bracha. So, but he doesn't really explain why. But the Mishnah Berurah says, but what's the right thing to do? What should you do? You should be machmir. You should make sure that you should do this. You should wash your hands. You should wash your hands without saying a bracha. And I think probably the reason is that according to those who are stringent about this, is probably because they understand, right? Remember, we said the first two reasons, right? Truma, or because about being clean and sanctifying yourself. So I assume it's because they're holding by that opinion that really the reason why we wash our hands before we eat bread nowadays is because it's all about just being clean and sanctifying yourself. And so even if you're eating less than an olive's worth, okay, so we might not say that you should make a bracha on it, but you should still make sure to wash your hands on it. Okay, and then we'll close with this last thing, very last rule, very very interesting, and I think a little controversial probably, because the Shulchan Aruch says that, okay, we talked about this master kabbalah, right? The activating, that there's some foods, where you say like fruits and vegetables, and you should apply to meat too, that only if they become wet, then they would become tamei. But if they don't become wet, they would never become tamei. So Shulchan Aruch says, this is what he says, that usually we go by whatever the Shulchan Aruch says, that he says, okay, let's say you're eating a food, and it's it's fruits or vegetables, it's meat, and then it was touched by so there's 7 liquids, right? I said water, but there's actually 7 different liquids that if this liquid would touch this food, we would say it now has been activated, right? It's now master l'kabel tuma, and if someone would touch it who's tamei, it would make it a problem for kohanim to eat. So he says that let's say you're eating any of these foods, let's say you're eating meat or something, and he touches these 7 drinks. The 7 drinks are wine, or honey, or oil, or milk, or dew, or blood, or water, any of these, okay? And it touched one of these foods, and you didn't dry it. It says, okay, and even if your hands don't touch this food, you need to wash your hands and you don't say a bracha. And the Ramah kind of qualifies a little bit. He says, no, the Ramah strengthens it. He says, even if it only touches the top of, let's say it's a carrot, right? Let's say it's a carrot. So let's say water touched the top of the carrot, but not the bottom of the carrot. He says, still, you have to wash your hands before you eat this carrot, even if you only want to eat the bottom of the carrot. So basically, in English, what are we saying? That anytime you eat a vegetable, anytime you eat a fruit, anytime you eat meat that has become wet, you need to wash your hands before. Don't say bracha, but you need to wash your hands. So I was reading this. I was like, I've never heard of this. I don't know anyone who's machmir about this, who's very stringent about this. I've been doing this wrong my whole life, and more than that, they're quoting, right. So I mentioned in the beginning that the Dirshu on the side, they're like contemporary rabbi. So they're quoting like these interesting cases. Like, let's say you put it in the fridge, right? Let's say you put meat in the fridge, and now it's got some condensation on it, so it's a little wet. So would you need to wash your hands there? And so they say maybe yes, maybe no. But I'm like, what are you talking about? I've never heard of anyone ever washing their hands, anyone washing their hands for this. So let's read what the Mishnah Berurah says, because it might surprise you, might not. So he says, so why does the Ramah say that you should wash your hands out of the bracha? He says there are some Rishonim who hold that the Chachamim never said that you need to, that the Chachamim only required washing your hands in their days is because they were very careful about Tamei Tahara. But nowadays, since we're all Tamei mates, we all have the status of basically touching of being Tamei. So therefore we don't need to make a bracha. Okay, but that was only talking about making a bracha. What about washing your hands? So he says there's a Magen Avram. This is a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, who brings him the Lechem Chamidot, that ha'olam noagim shelo litol v'yesh lahem amashi. That, nowadays, what do people do? Nowadays, people don't really wash their hands, and they have what to rely upon. But he says, harbe achronim, most achronim, many achronim, hachmir meod, they were very stringent about this. Because and so what should be the rule? It says nowadays what should you do? It's like how most commentaries paskin, that most commentaries come down, that you do need to wash your hands nowadays before you eat basically a wet vegetable. Okay, so I don't know. I still never heard anyone who does this. So could be that everyone's relying on this one opinion that he says nowadays we don't do it. It's the Magen Avram, and the Magen Avram actually quotes it from a Tosfos, which I looked at a Tosfos inside. Tosfos inside is talking about, it's in the Gemara Mesachim, which is talking about karpas and different dippings that you do. And Tosfos says, he says pretty explicitly, he says, I'll just read you inside. He says the ein anu. Nowadays, we don't need this washing. And if you would make a bracha on this, you'd actually be saying God's name in vain. That's not good. Don't make a bracha. Where is it? And so he says we don't need this, but he says and we don't even need this washing. So that's pretty explicitly that you don't even need to wash anymore. And they quote also from the Dirshu from Rosh Zalman Auerbach that he's also talking about regarding the karpas on this night of the Seder. Right? Because why do we keep talking about karpas? Because that's where the rule of karpas that's where it comes from. It comes from exactly this point that we're eating a wet vegetable. So that's why we have to wash our hands, and we don't say a bracha. That's exactly this sin. This is actually this rule that the Mishnah Berurah is saying that we should follow and we should be machmir about. So Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, there are many people, good people, who don't even do this washing the entire year. So we have what to rely upon. I did ask one of the boys here that I know. I said, is Rav Shechter in YU? One of the Rishiva, the base Rishiva in YU. He said, is he machmir about this? Is he careful about this? He said, no, Rav Shechter. He said he doesn't think Rav Shechter is stringent about this, and he doesn't wash his hands before he eats a wet vegetable. But he did say that one of the Rebbeim in Grus, which is YU in Israel, basically, he says that it's a good, it's not the worst thing it's a good practice to be machmir about it. It's over a Benarsh, that it's a good thing. It's a good chumrah to take on. It's a good stringency to take on if you want. Papa, did you hear of anyone ever being machmir about this, to wash their hands before they eat a wet vegetable? No, he says no. Abba, do you know of anyone? I think his AirPod's not working. No, he says no. He says no. He's never heard of anyone being machmir about this. Okay, so that seems like the minhag is no, but Mishnah Berurah did say you should be machmir, but usually we follow the minhag, and the minhag seems to be that no one, we're in the clear. If you haven't been doing it your whole life, if you're looking for extra stringency, maybe talk to your rabbi. If not, I think you should be okay. Shkoyach, everyone. And next week we'll continue with the rules of Tzilas Yadayim.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on.